Hey everyone, this is Curb Knight, and today we're going to be taking a look at Set 5 Rotovisor. So Rotovisor's deck is, I'm going to put it bluntly, not really good right now. It does have some potential, but as the deck stands right now, it's really not going to be making any splashes in the meta. But I will say that this deck is actually insanely fun to play. It is always fun to stand multiple rear guards and attack your opponent with big bungus numbers and not really care about what else happens. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and hop into the deck profile. So as always, we're going to be starting off with the ride line, and we are opting to just play the Rotovisor ride line. So of course we do have our basic D starter, just playing Rotovisor, the original. Doesn't really matter what it is, you don't have any effects that actually care about it. But we do have the grade 1 Rotovisor here, which when he is ridden upon by a grade 2 Rotovisor, currently there is actually only one. You just search your deck for an arena card and reveal it, and it does have this other effect where if another unit in the column is stood by a card ability, that unit gets plus 5k. But of course, we're not really playing anymore. So basically, when you ride up to 2, you search out the grade 2 arena, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. And then of course, the grade 2, when it is ridden over by a grade 3 Rotovisor, you check the top 7 cards of your deck, and then you can choose a grade 3 or graded Rotovisor and add it to your hand or an arena card. But if you do not add anything, you do actually get to call this card out. It does actually have a skill which is a lot more relevant than the grade 1 because it does pop out sometimes. But basically when it attacks, it gets 5k so long as you have a Rotovisor Vanguard at grade 3. So do remember that this is a 15k attacker because sometimes it does pop itself out. Of course, the main star of the show, our main Vanguard. During your turn, if your order zone has 3 or more arenas, all your front row units get plus 5k, which is great and all, but the problem with this deck is that you cannot get 3 arenas in your order zone until turn 4, which is probably one of the biggest things holding this deck back. And of course, the other reason this deck is being held back is that at the end of this battle attacked, you have to CB2 in order to draw a card and choose the same number of rear guards as you have arenas in your aura zone and stand them. Then if you do, once again, if you're on turn 4 and you have all 4 arenas, all those stood rear guards get another 5k in addition to it. So this is just basically a very big multi-attack deck. Previously, the biggest problem with this deck was that it was CB2 locked, meaning that you did have to take 2 damage. Thanks to some new support cards, that's a little bit more mitigated, but at the same time, you still do have some CB issues. Alright, so getting into the main deck, of course, starting off with the grade 3s, we are opting to play the 3 copies of Persona Ride. Now, I always find myself drawing into Persona Ride multiple times. Do note that Persona Ride is searchable off of your grade 2 because it only adds grade 3 Rotovisors, which is kind of a bummer. Most of the time, you're probably looking for an arena, but if you do see a Persona Ride, remember that you can add it. But when you do hit that Persona Ride, which is fairly consistent in this deck, on that turn 4, you tend to go for like really big numbers, and it is totally possible to like finish someone off there, assuming that they're not like a super tanky deck. But moving on into actual units, we are playing only 3 copies of the new Rotovisor. This is Trabant Rotovisor. Once again, being a grade 3 Rotovisor, he is searchable off of the grade 2. But the main skill we do care about him for is EB3. You choose one of your Vanguard's Rotovisor, and then until the end of turn, you change that unit's original auto abilities to Counter Blast 1, which is very funny that every single time we've gotten Counter Blast 2 on a Vanguard in Standard, we always get a card that says, actually, no, you don't have to do that. Because basically what you're doing is, instead of Counter Blasting to your EB3, CB1 in order to get the restand, but do remember this is an act ability. It does kind of suck that it's EB3 because it conflicts with a lot of our other skills. If this were just like EB2, this card would be insanely so much better. But we work with what we have to. Now it does actually have another skill, which is when this unit is stood by the ability of your grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Rotovisor, you Soul Blast Mood 1, choose any of your arenas. You Soul Blast 1, choose any number of arenas in your order zone, and stand them. Then if you stand 3 or more, you can Counter Blast 1 to give all your front row guards an extra 10k power. So if you're able to use that skill, which you don't always use because Specifically in this build, your counterblast is limited a lot of the times. But if you do get that off, you're looking at columns that are hitting upwards of 40 to 60. So your numbers do get pretty insane on that restand. But you know, the whole goal of the deck is to kind of just live to that point, which does get difficult sometimes. Alright, so moving on into the grade 2s, we are opting to play 4 copies of the Compassionate Mechanic. Now this is our main attacker. Your front row is probably going to end up being a Trabant and a Compassionate, just because those are probably your best 2 attackers, and they do buff each other up. So if you have 2 or more arenas, thankfully she does get 5k, so on turn 3 you're almost always going to have her be a 15k attacker. But the main reason we're playing her is that second skill. At the end of battle, she attacks if you are on grade 3 and an arena was tapped for her battle. You can EB3 in order to draw a card and choose normal units, gets 5k until the end of turn. Thankfully that is until end of turn, so when you do restand that thing that you gave 5k to, you know, you get to keep reusing that 5k. But you know, she's pretty good. She's EB3. Once again, like EB3 is like very high cost for this deck. If some of the skills were EB2, considering the fact that, you know, that kind of plays into the whole mechanic of the deck, this deck would be much better. But you know, it's extra card draw. You have card draw off your Vanguard, you have card draw off her, so you do actually draw a lot of cards in this deck. So the problem is, you know, whether those cards are good enough. But anyways, continuing on, this deck does not use Soul at all, and it does also have like some consistency issues, and also you know, carding issues because you tend to not have a lot of shield. So we are opting to play 4 copies of Habitable Zone as our cycler of choice. Once again, we do have things that are EB3. We have EB3 for her. We have EB3 for Trombant, so we don't want to be playing the other cycler, even though we do have ways of actually making energy in this deck. I've just found that Habitable Zone is just much better, since this deck doesn't really use its soul for anything except for like maybe once for the Trabant, but we're basically using our soul for our cyclers. But basically when you discard him for Ride, you Soul Blast 1, put him on the bot to draw a card, so you just kind of keep up your advantage. And the other skill he has does actually come up, where if he's placed while you Persona Ride, you CB1, search your deck for a set order, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then you can play up to 2 orders. Now, if you're actually able to play Habitable Zone on turn 4, a lot of the times you can kind of just close out the game there, because if you think about it, you're setting up 4 arenas, which means if you're able to create 2 columns, you're going for 1 column, which is fully boosted, a second column fully boosted, and then you're swinging your Vanguard for at least 28. And then you're restanding both columns, so you have another 2 massive swings after that. So if you can manage to pull off using Habitable Zone skill, have enough CB in order to actually restand and actually make full columns, a lot of times that can spell doom for your opponent. Of course, the problem with that is, you know, it's not always easy to get to that point, especially considering that the deck can be a little bit tight at sometimes. So continuing on, I've mentioned that a lot of the issues of this deck is that it does, even though it draws a lot, it kind of just minuses, especially in the early game. So to that effect, I've decided to play a new card that I am very much liking. This is the Refractal Dragon. So he is, when he is discarded during your hand, from your hand during your turn, if your Vanguard is at least grade 2, you can Soul Blast 1 and call him to the rear yard circle. But if you call him during the battle phase, he can't attack until the end of turn. And then if any player's card was put into your order zone, he does get boost. So effectively what we're doing here is playing 8 cyclers so that we don't minus when we do actually ride up. The other reason is he does get boost, which is something that the deck really struggles with, where you have a lot of good boosters, but the problem is that all the good boosters in Brontgate don't tend to really stick around. But he is there just to like help you make, he does make really good numbers, because you make 25 boosting this, or 23 when he's boosting the other Rotovisor. So he's just kind of pretty solid. The one issue is that after turn 4, you don't really put a lot of orders in your order zone anymore. So it can be difficult to actually proc that boost ability. So do keep that in mind, that he's not always going to have boost, especially if the game drags on a little bit too long, but we do actually have a second way of proccing his skill to call himself out, which we'll get to later. So moving on, we of course are going to finally hop into the set order. The set order for this deck, we're going to be playing 4 copies of the Noble Grapple Arena, the Urban City. This is the first one we got, and it is a grade 2 order, which kind of sucks because, like I said, that's the main reason you can't get 3 orders until turn 4. But anyways, whenever your unit attacks, as long as you're on Rotovisor, you can tap this card as long as you haven't tapped anything else, and then you get an on-hit skill, which is when it hits, you can either countercharge 1 or energy charge 2. I really wish that were energy charge 3, or that some of the skills use energy 2, because unless you're hitting 3 times and energy charging 3 times, this is really not very efficient, because you're energy blasting in increments of 6, and just getting 2 energy kind of just leaves you with 1 extra energy most of the time. But it is, it is what it is. You do need to play this. A lot of times this is what you're searching out. You're going to play it, you're going to swing, hopefully you have something to boost your Vanguard so that you can guarantee hits. It is actually a lot harder to guarantee the on hit than you would think, because you just don't have enough of these in the order zone to make your attacks threatening. Because you're going turn 3, okay, you have 2, you do want to create 5 attacks, which means you have 5 attacks, but only 2 of them have on hits because you only have 2 in the order zone, meaning that your opponent has 3 attacks that they can freely take without having to worry about anything. So it can be difficult to proc. My advice for which one to use, I would always energy charge unless you can counter charge, in which case pretty much always counter charge unless you really need the area or the energy. Like say you're at 1 energy and then you swing in with a mechanic and you tap it. If it hits, you can energy charge 2 up to 3, and then you can energy blast 3 for her. But speaking of energy, we are just playing 1 copy of the new arena, so that we can just play 5, because previously, if you lost 1 of these, it was kind of okay. But if you lost 2 of them, that meant you were never really getting up to 3 unless you're playing some cards that I don't think are really that great. But playing 5 makes it that much more consistent to hit the 3 by turn 4. But this one is not as good. It has the same skills, tap it when your unit attacks. But this one on hit lets you EB3 to draw a card, which sounds nice, but if you remember, we already have 2 cards that are eating away at our energy, so a lot of times using this skill does not happen. It's kind of just there to be an arena to tap. A lot of times, especially if you're oh, they're probably not going to let it hit, and you just have 3 energy, you swing with this and you tap this one so that you can energy blast 3 anyway to draw a card, even if the attack doesn't hit. Yeah, so it's just basically there to be fodder and the 5th arena, so a lot of times you're not really proccing this effect. And then our last grade 2 card, we're just going to be playing 1 copy of Twin Cast, just because, it's a solid card. Honestly, this could probably be anything. You could try Caliburn. I wouldn't recommend Forbid All, but a lot of the problem with playing a Regalius piece in this deck is that you do need to be playing the arena every single turn, and there's no way to actually set up your arenas yet. So playing Blitz Order is probably your best option if you do want to play a Regalius piece. If not, you can probably just tech in some other card. Alright, so getting into the grade 1s, we aren't playing too many, which is, another issue this deck had. We're playing 4 copies of the Balderade. So Balderade, when he boosts, if your Vanguard is grade 3 and you have 2 or more set orders, he gets 5k. So he's a 13k booster, which is really nice. But the main skill we use him for is at the end of the battle he boosts. If you have an order in your order zone, you can put him into the soul to check the top 5 cards, choose a grade 2 or greater unit card from among them, put it to your hand, and shuffle the deck. So you do sometimes whiff on this, which feels really bad, but you do have a decent amount of targets. You've got all the cyclers, you've got the compassionate mechanic, as well as the Rotovisor grade 3, and you can also search persona rides, and it does also search set orders, which I think I missed, which is also very helpful. But continuing on, I'm opting to play just 2 copies of the Pantera the Slasher. This is the Order Cycler. If you didn't play an order, you call it and pitch a card in order to send an order, and then you can play it. And then, of course, since we are playing set orders, they just got played to the order zone instead of going to the bottom of the deck. I'm actually not opting to play any Bulb Mine just because, I don't know, I think this meta is you can tempo yourself out. You don't really need it. And the problem with Bulba Mine is the same thing as this, where you use it and it goes away and now you don't have a booster. I like this card just because it sticks around, and it also helps you boost that consistency, because if you miss the set order on your turn 4, your turn 4 is like not really hitting as well as you want it to, even with a Persona Ride, because you're losing out that extra 5k, and you're also only restanding 2 things, and you just don't have as much oomph as you would need. And of course, he does actually also combo with the Refractile Dragon, because this doesn't actually care when it's discarded. You just have to discard it in order to, actually make it, call it back on board. Okay, then of course, just, hammering out the basic things. You got your 4 PGs. I'm not playing Elementaria right now just because it's in other decks, but definitely if you want to play this deck, I would probably just play Elementaria. All right, and then for a trigger lineup, I've actually opted to go ahead and just do, a vanilla trigger lineup, playing 4 crits, 4 front, and of course 3 draws. Ideally, you probably should just be playing like effect crits, because you do sometimes have soul issues in this deck. Like sometimes you would want to use the grade 3, but you also don't want to. But at the same time, the 5k power does come up, because if you have to call this, it's better to scale it in increments of 5k, because when it restands, it's going to get another 5k, so it makes it 10k, whereas 9k is not hitting as nice of a number. But it's just, basic arguments there. And then of course we are just playing the 4 heals, best Bront heal, objectively, and then of course Eldo Breath is our over trigger. I mean, it's really hard to beat Eldo Breath in a Bront Gate deck, so you gotta play it. Alright, so as always, we're just going to finish off with a quick little test hand. We're going to go ahead and start off with those top 5 cards of the deck. So you do actually want to keep at least 1 arena. If you have 2, you want to mull 1 back, because you definitely need to play a second arena on turn 3. Habitable Zone is always a solid card. And theoretically, I think we could keep Baldurate here around, because he can be a booster for the Vanguard. But we technically could keep the PG, but I'm going to go ahead and just mull it back in. We're going to go ahead and draw. And we saw actually the last 2 pieces that we did need, of course, that being the friendly mechanic, or the compassionate mechanic there, and the other Rotovisor. Go ahead and shuffle up, and then go ahead and stand. So we're totally fine going first or second in this deck. It really doesn't matter too much. Of course, riding up, we're going to go discard the Habitable Zone, ride into the grade 1 Rotovisor, just Soul Blast 1, and draw a card. Now in the early game, you do have to kind of just soak up damage, because like I said, you do need 2 CB. Technically with this hand, we don't need 2 CB, because we have the Rotovisor there. But we're gonna go ahead and draw for a turn. Let's go ahead and discard the Compassionate Mechanic to ride. Unfortunately, we didn't see any of our other cyclers, which is kind of unfortunate, because minusing from riding up is kind of annoying. But sometimes you just don't see any of the 8 cards in your opening hand. You just don't draw into them. But we're going to go ahead and search out our arena. Now we are going to go ahead and play it. So theoretically at this point, if you already have a urban city, you can search out the Winter Dome. But you always want to be playing this one first. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and call. And then we're going to swing with our Vanguard, and we're going to tap the urban city to make sure that this hits. Sure, they might want to pass it, but that's honestly just a not great play. We're going to go ahead and drive check, and then the attack's gonna hit. We don't have any counterblast used, so we're gonna go ahead and just energy charge 2. And then taking this next attack, critical triggers, that makes it easier for us to guard these next attacks. So we're gonna go ahead and stand and draw, and we did actually draw into another cycler. I didn't mention it, but this is just a Habitable Zone. We're gonna go and discard. We're gonna ride into our grade 3, use the skill to check the top 7 cards of the deck. Let's see, we got 6, 7 here. So we do have 2 targets. We could either get this, or we get the arena. Since we do already have a copy of the grade 3 Rotovisor, we're just gonna go ahead and yoink the arena. And of course, we're just gonna shotgun playing it. You notice I didn't use Boulder Raid during the last turn. Once again, that's another thing that you do have to do here and consider. Sometimes you don't wanna just get rid of your boosters, because then your things, don't have boosters. We're gonna go ahead and play it. So we can go ahead and call it the Compassionate. And this, we should be at, let's see, we went first, so that means we energy charged up to 6, and then we energy charged, so we're at 8. So we're going to go ahead and use 3 of that energy in order to make that CB1. Especially very good to do if you're only at 2 CB, you don't want to heal down. So you do kind of have to take that into consideration. So we're going to go ahead and swing. We're going to go Compassionate Mechanic at the end of the turn. We're going to EV3 and draw another card. And then we're going to go ahead and swing with our other one, who is now at 18k thanks to the Compassionate Mechanic. And then we're going to swing our Vanguard in here for this is only 26. And this is the hard part about playing this. You kind of have to consider where is your opponent going to let you use your or let you hit. In this instance, I would assume they probably are going to take it, but at the same time, I kind of want to keep one of these because I won't be able to like energy charge. But like if they're gonna, it looks like they're gonna take it, you can always just tap it there. So just go ahead and drive check 2 times. We do hit a front trigger, which is great, which means all these attacks are going to hit over defensive. Thanks to this, we only need to counterblast 1 to restand these 2. And of course, we do get to draw a card. And also in this instance, we do have the extra soul. So what we can actually do is go ahead and soul blast here, untap both of the urban cities, and now we have 2 more on hits. If one of them hits, we can go ahead and countercharge and swing with the other one. So we didn't actually get a Persona Ride yet, which is kind of booty cheeks, but you know they're going to go ahead and swing in at us. Actually, what we could do, what we should be doing is using Balderade to try and dig for that Persona Ride. Like I said, you know, don't forget about your skills. You know, that's the biggest thing that you should always do. Never forget about your skills because they will come in handy. Who would have known? Hit a draw trigger there. Go ahead and draw a card and guard. So as you can see, I have a pretty decent board setup, but like I said, of course, I draw into a Persona Ride. You tend to lose out on a lot of boosters. So going into this turn, I can restand 3 units, but unfortunately, I do only have 2. But what we're going to do is we're going to go to end Persona Ride. We're going to draw a card. If I had a Panthera or Pantera right now, that'd actually be super sick. But I don't. So what I'm going to have to do is we'll play the 3rd arena, and then we're just going to go ahead and call this booster. Since they're a grade 3, I'm going to go ahead and give it to the Glanzel, or not the Glanzel, the Trabant, because he is going to be hitting for a little bit of a better number here. What we can do here is now we don't really have to worry about when we're tapping these, so we're going to go ahead and swing. If it hits, we energy charge. If it doesn't, whatever. We'll draw another card off of her skill, and then we'll go ahead and swing this other column for, let's see, this should be extra 5k from this, 10k from Persona Ride, 5k from his skill, so that's plus 28, 33, 43, a total of 43. Like I said, these numbers scale pretty big. This was at 30 just by itself, so we'll swing 43, and then we'll go ahead and swing, didn't mention it, but we did use that skill to, you know, reduce the counterblast to 1. But although we might not need to use that, depending on how much our energy is at, like, if we have the extra energy, we might as well do it. If not, it's fine to CB2 in this situation. It's going to be pretty hard to heal down. Of course, we did need to tap something for that battle, but we're going to go ahead and swing our Vanguard, drive check 1, drive check 2, getting another front trigger, which is going to make these numbers insane as we're going to counterblast 1. And we did also want to tap there so that we can restand 3 units, and then we can use this skill to Soul Blast 1 again, and we restand all of our arenas. Since we did actually restand 3, we can counterblast 1 and give these an additional 5k. So that means that this is swinging for 35 with the front trigger, 45, and then of course with the extra 10k here, that means that this is 55 all by itself. And then of course this attack, which got 5k to each of these, an extra 10k as well as that front trigger. It was swing for 45 before, now it's swing for 55, 60, 63 in at our opponent. Right, so that's going to do it for the deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to do those things, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.